Olga Krimon, welcome to my podcast, The Undraped Artist. It's really an honor to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to
So,
be here.
so we obviously know each other, but I would like to hear, I would like you to talk a little bit about your background. Where did you come from, and how did you get into an art field?
Oh gosh. So I was born in Ukraine, but I lived in Russia for the first 17 years. And we have a very structured sort of atelier type program for 4 years that you go through. So that's what I graduated from. So I always wanted to do it. I was always in it, but once I graduated, I thought, it was the 80s in Russia, who wants another artist in Russia at that time? So I just kind of put everything aside, and I thought I was gonna just have a normal life and um, normal career. So I came to the US in 91. So in
And why did you
94,
come to the US? What motivated that?
it was a complete well, accident is not the word. I represented my university. I studied English and German, I guess, at the university, and my university sent me to compete in Moscow just to represent them. That there were like five of us going, and I won the competition. And the award was 10 months in a liberal arts college in the States. And
Oh,
that's where I ended up in North Carolina. I ended up in Davidson College because they picked me and another guy from this program. So it was a student exchange program for 1 year. When I
okay.
was there, I was very fortunate to get a full scholarship to continue and to graduate. As I was studying, the Soviet Union split up. So I realized I have very little to come back to, and my parents decided to emigrate as well.
Hmm.
So it was a very and it was a very unstable time where I was not sure if I was making the right decisions, but there was nowhere to go back to, I guess. I couldn't go back to Odessa, where I'm from. I couldn't back to Kazan, where I grew up in Russia. They were different countries at the time. Everything
Mm-hmm.
just needed to fall apart. If you think about it, like when I was I came here in 91 and I came here in August 91. It was during the day of the coup where Gorbachev was taken. So I was in Moscow on my bags with like tanks on the street. It was just, art was the last thing I was thinking about. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Art was always an escape. Art was always a way to be very good at something else and not be in the real life. So art and reality were two different things for me for the very long time, and maybe even today to a
Mm-hmm.
point. And maybe that's why when I finally realized that I belonged there, it was through that escapism. Like I had to be somewhere else, and that's how I got back to it. And I guess I never actually quit. I just did it for myself without anybody even knowing what I was doing. I was just kind of, it was more than a hobby, way more than a hobby. It was a way of survival or therapy, but it was not a career for
Yeah.
the very for a very, very long time. And I don't know if it's right or wrong. I mean, I wish I had all those years, back, that I could create, much more and be much more ahead. At the same time, there is a place, or there is a reason for everything. Like
Yeah.
I keep telling myself, okay, I was able to build a foundation. One, I was able to build a foundation where I could afford to jump into a career in art. Two, I was much more, I've done something else. I've done corporate life for a long time. So I have something to compare to. And I assure you, it's not the money that I went into this career for. There is, I can compare this job with normal corporate jobs, and I can tell you this is a much, much harder path for
Yeah.
people. I don't think, youngsters who are just out of MFA or, atelier, I don't think they know just what is out there. And I guess I made that choice. It was a conscious choice. It was not because I couldn't do something else. It was because I had to do this.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
and
how old were
unfortunately,
you when you made this choice? When you made the
was
switch? How old were you when you made this switch?
so I would say I became very serious about it after 2004, 2005.
Mm-hmm.
2007, I remember that year because that's the year that I spent in Jeremy Lipking's Tuesday night classes
Mm-hmm.
and Orbik's classes, who was his drawing teacher. So I 2007 was my, and 2008 when I was dedicating every moment of time, getting back and really being serious. And then I think it was 2010 when I started to get my first Portrait Society awards and etc., getting national into the national shows, etc. So I would say 2010 and onwards is when I consider myself being in this career. However, that said, I had a full-time until job in corporate in IT. I managed IT projects for a very long time. And that happened until 2017. So 2010 through 2017, I literally led a dual life. I was in everything that I wanted to get into, but I didn't know how to jump. Two, it's a scary thing to do, and three, I just needed to build up.
Yeah.
So I got into galleries first, and then I made a decision that yes, this is the right time. I was waiting for the right time, but that meant nights, weekends, every moment of time. You basically just don't do anything else. You just have your job, and then you have this,
Mm-hmm.
and take care of the kids the
That's what I was going
best
to
way.
say, but you also had a family. So you were living three lives.
Three, yeah, and maybe that's partially why I got divorced during that time too. I just couldn't. There are certain things that had to give, I
Yeah.
guess. But I knew that that's who I was, and I just wish I knew it earlier because, and you can't go back. I mean, those experiences are great experiences, and I loved the projects that I've done, and I loved the people that I worked with, and I loved the discipline that you know taught me. There are so many things that I'm very grateful for. But this was my path. Now, my path was to try everything else and to try to get away from it. And I guess, if you meant to do this, you just absolutely cannot do anything else. I mean, you
Yeah.
can, people can and they can make money and they will be absolutely unhappy. And that's what I was for a very long time.
Right.
So I had to do what I had to do.
Yeah. So when you say you can't do anything else, you don't mean as far as your capability, you mean as far as your happiness.
My happiness. I
Right.
was it was harder and harder to leave actually because your career there is picking up and you're comfortable and you're, at that point I had a team of project managers. We had what, 60, 65 projects going on at once. It was a very comfortable time. I worked for DirecTV, and then it got merged with AT&T at the time, and
Hmm.
we had very interesting projects. I've done Teradata upgrades and revenue assurance projects. Everything else, but it was missing. Like something was missing, and it took me a very long time to find out that this is what was missing. And I was also, for that period of 2010 to through 2017, as I was getting into the art world, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I ever even mentioned it to anybody. I was a bit embarrassed to be like, I felt like I'm not a real artist, that I'm getting into this group of real full-time artists, and I am sort of not telling the full story, you know, and so it took me a while, even mentally, to get there. And I wanted to be sure that I'm there. Like, I didn't want to just quit everything. I mean, I couldn't just quit everything and just dive into it and see what happens. I had to be sure that I can actually see myself doing it, and I can work with the galleries, and I can work with, you know, with the dealers and such. So with the collect. So I felt, I mean, I don't know, that was my path. I guess everybody does it differently, but yes, I would love to get some of those years back. So,
Yeah. But how much did you paint during those years?
I painted quite a bit, but I guess there was no pressure to create a painting that week.
Right.
I had a painting where I worked on the painting for 6 months, to be honest, but it was a large full-time painting, and I had a 20 by 20 painting, I remember, because that was my first Portrait Society finalist, where it was 5 weekends, but it was weekends from 8 a.m. to, you know, to 5 p.m. with the model. Um,
Wow. And you did that while raising kids and having a full-time job?
um, yeah, but
Wow.
ironically, you know, it's interesting that you know, once I divorced, it was that 50-50, and in that 50% of the time that you have,
Yeah.
it was a very strange time, but I wanted it so badly. I was almost obsessed. I think now looking back, I uh, I almost had to get my time back, like reverse the time, and try to. But I think I did it the right way. I loved certain artists. Actually, that's when I discovered your work,
Oh, is it?
way before we met. I think it was either through International Artists magazine. There was something about you, I think, in the Portrait Society. And then I discovered Jeremy, and I learned that Jeremy was right here. And
That was a
fortunately,
blessing.
it was I got so fortunate. He doesn't do that anymore. And you know, Jeremy, he doesn't talk, so you can't say it's a class. You paint there with the same model, and that's exactly what I wanted. I don't want him to speak. I want to see how he's doing it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And Glen Orbik, who unfortunately passed away, he was Jeremy's drawing teacher. So before I went to Jeremy's, I actually went to study with Glen in Thousand Oaks, and that was invaluable. And yeah, I feel like, and that's what I see with the students coming to my workshops. You have to get the drawing first. So you cannot come to the
Mm-hmm.
portrait class without that. And yes, I had the years of training in Russia, but I had to, you know, I had to get back to it. And I remember, and it's funny, I remember the first time that I entered that Thousand Oaks um, um, studio that doesn't exist anymore. And again, he passed away. But I remember coming in there for the first time and inhaling. And after all these years of not being in a studio and not being in an art school, inhaling the charcoal and inhaling that smell of the wood, of the easels, and I almost cried. Like, I honestly, it was that blast from the past, and I just felt like, okay, this is it. Like, that's my smell. That's, I get
Yeah.
emotionally, I you know when I remember it right now, I get emotional because that, like, I inhaled and I just knew, like, I just knew that this is it,
Hmm.
and I never went back. So yeah,
So,
but yeah.
so one thing you mentioned earlier is that you felt like an imposter when you started. Um, did that ever go away? And the reason I ask you that is because I've been painting for 20 years professionally, and I sometimes still feel that way.
Um, I'm glad you disclosed it because it's easier for me to say. Yes, we are up and down all the time. You know, there are people that are this and we are this, and maybe to create, you have to be that. You know, how unfortunate for people around us, but that's sort of, if I if it flows, I'm here. If it doesn't, I'm here. And especially with Instagram, and you start looking at paintings and you start looking at, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and that's where I have that feeling again. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And nowadays with the social media, it's just like you realize. I mean, I was looking through my social media yesterday to find out who I wanted to interview,
Hmm.
and I mean, it's just endless. I mean, granted, there are 8 billion people in the world, right? So you're going to expect to find 1,000 artists. But at the same time, it's, when I was young and all I had was Barnes and Noble, there might have been
Hmm.
4 or 5 living artists producing books, and that's all you thought was out there, right? And
But
now it's
how
just like there's so many out there.
we're so fortunate, and there's so much. I mean, every other day I discover new amazing, whether it's an artist or a photographer. Photographers influence me quite a bit as well, you know, compositionally, or the way they crop, or and the simplicity of some of those pieces. That's what that's what amazes me. I think we over complicate so much. You
Hmm.
know, sometimes I look at Zorn or Sargent, and especially if I squint, it's such a simple pattern of light and dark, and I keep going back to, maybe it's the elimination. It's not how much we put in, it's how much we take back and how much we don't say, that amazes me sometimes. And maybe I know we're going, like, I'm going on a tangent, but that's what attracts me in so many of Instagram artists. And it's so easy to connect now as well.
Hmm.
You know, it's so easy to message somebody, and all of a sudden, you know, they've been following you for a while, you are following them for a while. It's all, I feel like I'm social. I'm not, you know, I might not see that many people, but I feel like, you know, through that, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And but with that, do you have this feeling, you see so much that once in a while you feel like you are painting, and all of a sudden you're remembering, wait a second, I saw that pose, or I saw that down to a stroke somewhere. Am I unique, or am I taking it from somebody without even thinking?
Oh,
And that,
absolutely.
and it blocks me, right? It blocks
Absolutely. Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Especially if your desire is to really be authentic and to be yourself, which I think you and I would agree it's impossible to be truly unique, right? Otherwise, we'd all be just scratching symbols in the dirt, or on cave walls. I mean, we're borrowing from people before us. Um, but but I agree with you. Knowing where that line is sometimes difficult for where the line is between originality and just ignoring all the good things that came before us. Yeah, sometimes it's tricky. So, because I mean, I'm sure you have many influences
Yeah.
in your work. Although I got to be honest, I can't pinpoint them. Many people I can pinpoint their influences. So that says
Mm.
something for you. I'm looking at your work and I can't see what your influences are. So that says a lot about, this subject. You're clearly not, at least I haven't seen the artist you're looking at, if there is one or two that you're borrowing from. So that's a good thing. But all of us have influences, and knowing where that healthy place is between borrowing and stealing from those it can be difficult. Yeah, especially with all this information, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I am trying to find a way of not overthinking it, because that's where all of a sudden my creative process just kind of becomes stagnant. Like I can be halfway or, somewhat through a painting, and then all of a sudden I have that noise in my head, like, wait a second, I think I remember that photographer who had a model in that diagonal space or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden I am, obsessed a bit with that, and I'm trying to find it and trying to make sure that I'm not quite. But you're right, it's impossible. It's impossible not to have those images in your head. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's you're looking at it every day, or who were the French, were they the naturalists who were trying to just kind of go back to naive art and trying to get away from society and such, but that's another extreme, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So how do you? I want to back up a little bit, because this is something that like I said, I deal with this too. I think most creative people do, which is why our spouses have a hard time living with us. But so how do you cope? How do you deal with those ups and downs in your art? And maybe you could describe them a little more and what you mean by that, because I think there are people out there that are new to this field
Mhm.
that probably don't think it's normal, but the more I've every artist I've talked to deals with this. So how do you cope with those ups and downs, and what are they like?
um, I wish I had a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep going to the easel and just making myself uh, just continue, I guess, because it doesn't work in this profession. It doesn't work to wait for inspiration or whatever. Who was it that said, like, my inspiration hits every day in the morning when I sit down in front of my canvas? That's I think the biggest thing is to kind of push yourself when you're down, push yourself together and go there and just be there. I am trying to make myself not destroy as much when I am down, because especially I would say, even I cannot blame the COVID time, but it was something about the last couple of years where I noticed that I wipe off too much without just leaving it be, without letting it be there for 2 or 3 days and then coming back to it. I think that I need, somebody just to take it away from me the right time, I guess.
So
But
do you mean
yeah,
you sort of panic? You look at something, you're like, that's not good, and you wipe it before you live with it? Is that what you mean?
yes, yes. So that is something that I am very conscious of. And but you don't want to create just a painting. You want to create a painting that has the emotion, that has that feeling. And if you just don't feel it, um, but yeah, there were some of them where I fortunately took a photo and then I looked back and I said, well, if I just waited for a week, I think I could have.
Oh
I could.
no. Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it can be a liberating experience to just to let yourself start again. So that's how I think I need to deal with the downs somewhat, and I'm trying to um, let my kids know that, hey, I am in that sort of mode right now. Something didn't go, and so I can isolate myself more, I guess, because I
Mm-hmm.
become a little too uh, um, too abrupt, too, still a good person, but but in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and then and another thing that helps a lot is just simply to pick up a call and call either an artist friend. I called you one time, if you
Yeah, that was a
remember.
great conversation.
Yeah, and after that, it almost like it smoothed down that thing for me. And I think that we can really definitely help each other as well. Or I pick up a phone and I text my gallerist. Like one of my favorite people to work with is Jason Stone from Reinhardt Fine Art in Charleston. And I've been working with them for so long. And sometimes it's just a conversation with them. And then you realize, hey, we just had a collector who just fell in love with this painting. And all of a sudden, you know, you ride that wave again. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
But I don't,
you get a little that
whoever's,
boy.
yeah, but whoever's listening right now, don't think that we're not, mental. We're
Well,
not
speak for
talking,
yourself.
we're talking normal, normal thing, We just don't go and, I don't know, splurge on purses and stuff, that's the stupidity we do not do. We deal with it creatively, and we find ways, and honestly, you have to sort of like those downs as well, because sometimes that's when my best ideas come as well. It's
Hmm.
almost like that curve, and on this curve is where I find something new. But what if I introduce abstraction into it? What if I put more knife work into it? What would it? I'm allowing myself to experiment so much more. It's kind of, do you have this where you feel like your painting doesn't go the way you want, and you think, okay, well, it's probably not going to work out anyway. Now I can do whatever. Now it's not a commission, or it's not a piece for a gallery. Now I'm free.
I have
And
thought that. Yeah.
right? And when that freedom comes, all of a sudden your hand goes, because
Mm-hmm.
you're not you're allowing yourself to have that freedom, and it can be on those curves that it happens. Do you have this,
Oh,
or
absolutely. In fact, I kind of learned the hard way recently. I've done a lot of commissions over the past, I'd say, 10 years. And I've always had complete creative control. I'm going to put that in quotes here because I believed I had complete creative control, but I learned something about myself that because a project got canceled recently and I was halfway into it. Then it got canceled. And then all of a sudden, I started finding myself being more relaxed with the painting. So even though I dictated the terms of the painting, I still did. I was still confined, but it was sort of this I mean, I was doing it to myself. The pressure of knowing that there was someone waiting for it reduced my ability to be completely open and creative and free. Um, so I've kind of committed to not take many commissions. I mean, I'll take the really, really interesting ones, but not as many, at least not for a while. So yeah, I totally get that.
yeah, yeah. No, I totally understand that. I
Yeah.
totally.
So let's look at a little bit at your work now, because you've described some things that you said, like the knife work and all that stuff. So let's pull some of it up. And I want to talk, well, I'm going to just skim through it a little bit here. Um, God, these are so cool. Is there some place in particular you want to start?
You anywhere you click, I guess.
Okay.
This is interesting. I just actually put that page up this week because that's a brand new gallery that I'm starting to work with.
Okay. Is it the Whitethorn Gallery in Ireland? Oh, in Ireland. No kidding.
Yeah. It's going to be brand new. My friend Alda Bolding is working with them for a long time, and he was the one that recommended and connected us. And so they are literally arriving there tomorrow. But it's a good one because this is brand new pieces
Good.
uh, did in
Good.
the last couple of months.
So this is I'm looking for a title of the piece here. Okay. So how do you pronounce that? Marigny?
Marigny. So this is
Marigny?
a area, it was the area in New Orleans
Oh,
that had
okay.
jazz jazz scene, and I just went there for the first time this year with a friend, and so that kind of inspired. So that was the inspiration, and then also I just discovered Chad Baker this year,
Oh,
and
okay.
that quiet jazz, that sort of that My Funny Valentine kind of
Well,
vibe.
so for those who are listening and not watching, it's a trumpet player and he's leaning over his trumpet. It looks like maybe taking a break from playing, and it's incredibly loose. Just really energetic, beautiful strokes. Wide. I mean, in the coat, there's almost nothing there but a wash, and it looks like a big fan brush or something. Is that right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
I
and then
was
the trumpet, it's just like the end of the trumpet is like 10 strokes max, and it still feels like glistening copper or glistening brass. Beautiful. It's just beautiful.
I was literally just fixated on the thickness of the light. So he was illuminated somewhat from the back, and that light on his sleeve and all through his hair, that sort of silhouette, that's what I was trying to make it be about, and everything else sort of was secondary. It's a series I did, so I've done I think 3 or 4 trumpet players where I was trying to see how much I can simplify. And the more I was getting into them, every next one was simpler than the previous one, sort of, until I came to this. It's sort of I literally positioned him on that arch that did not exist in my reference. I
Hmm.
do have a good model, but I positioned him that way, but I continued the arch. And maybe that's the theme that I will see in most of my paintings. I tend to continue the lines through, whether it's the line from the figure, but I will get through in the background. It will continue somewhere. It will continue with counterbalance. It would be mimicked somewhere else. I'm trying to play with composing through sort of those continuations and those repetitions. I think
Yeah.
here's another arch. Yeah, that's my Weightless series. My youngest son was the model in it, but
Yeah.
I overemphasized I created the pattern of the shadow, and I created that arch of you know
Across the top here.
across the top.
Yeah. So, yeah, so this weightless, it's bigger than I would think. I mean, that just goes to show how loose this is. 24 by 36, that's not a small painting.
Yeah,
Um,
this one was created first. I have another Weightless number one, I think was a smaller, I think 16 by 20. But I just felt like with that stroke layering, I could go bigger. That is something that I constantly, and maybe you have a better answer to. When I love something on a smaller scale that I've done,
mhm.
I then want to create it larger. And yet I'm thinking, but I've done something similar. What does it do for my small, I don't want to create the same piece. They will never be the same. The strokes are different, the
Right.
values are changed, the color combinations are different, but the pose is the same. So do you, in your work, do you see a problem, or do you overthink that
I
where
totally overthink that.
right?
I
Y'all
don't
done
see
that.
a problem with it at all. But no, let me rephrase that. I don't overthink it. My
Mhm.
temperament won't allow it because I'm too easily bored and distracted. So once I'm done with something, I'm done with it, and I'm too bored to do it twice. So it's not, I think I always envy the artist that can take a particular subject and really flesh it out and really get a lot of mileage out of it. because I feel like I'm just sort of doing one-offs every time. Just I get this subject
Mhm.
done and I never approach it again. It's like this unwritten rule in my brain.
Mhm.
But it's only due to my temperament. It's not like I don't, like I said, I envy the artists that do it. I'd like to be able to do it. I'm just bored. So I
Yeah.
don't. But it seems like a different reasoning than yours. So I would say no. I think you should do it. If you have the energy to do it, do it. I would, but I just don't have it in me.
It's very infrequent that
Mm-hmm.
I would take the same theme, but it would be one where it's almost like it's in my head too much. I keep thinking and thinking and thinking. It's and until I do it again, or I do it differently, or I do it on a lot much larger, it will keep coming back. You almost have to release it out.
Yeah.
That's the only, it doesn't happen that often.
Well, this
Um,
one, I can see why you did it big. And I'm trying to imagine this is 36 inches wide. So this stroke right here is like 6 inches long. I
it's
mean,
huge.
you've got some big, big strokes. And I mean, this thing is really abstract. The legs, if you cut the painting off in the middle here, you would have no idea those were legs if there were no context. That's how
Yeah.
loose it is. But you talked earlier about this desire to simplify and to see what you could get away with and how little information you could put in. And man, are you successful with that on this paint, on all the paintings I've seen of yours. But those legs, those aren't legs, but they look like legs in context. It's unbelievable.
I know
Unbelievable.
it's funny because the legs and even the strokes that you showed, I reworked and re sort of massaged them over and over, and the legs were actually positioned quite differently. I moved them, to not be as diagonal as they used to be. So, I want to show as if it's a stroke, but sometimes it takes several attempts to do it. But with the legs, yeah, the legs first were actually a much more they were handled very similar to the top of his
Hmm.
body,
What made you change
and
your mind?
it just did not work. Like my focus was sort of all over. I could not. I need the viewer to come in to the warmth of his back, of the darkness of his head, of the warmth of his back. You can't see here, but the thickness of the paint and the lights, it's actually very thick, and that's where I have some of the knife work as well. I want to be there, and I don't want to have the attention to the legs, and the legs are just there for the movement. I felt like when I had them more defined, I felt like he's flying rather than being in the water.
Hmm.
I had to have the water wash off some of that
Yeah.
in in my sort of thinking of it. So it was too much, and I just let it go. I just
Well,
let
it
it go.
works beautifully. So
Yeah.
are you familiar? I'm going to skip some because I want to get to other sections and I'm just going to kind of pan through. Are you familiar with Alyssa Monks or Monk? Is it Monks or Monk?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, yes, and I love her work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because she obviously does a lot of water and shower scenes, but it's interesting how differently they can be done because you are completely polar opposite in your approach. Both are amazing, but that's what
Yeah,
makes you unique.
portraits. Her portraits behind the glass with
Yeah.
those sort of droplets of water and such. They're amazing. They're amazing.
They
I'm
are.
using water as an excuse to abstract, I
Yeah, you
think.
can tell. So tell me
As
about this one. This one is really, really interesting. It's so abstract,
It's
except,
absolutely abstract, and quite frankly, I this is the one that I kind of let it go. Like I was not overthinking this one too much. It was nobody in particular. It's a reference that I have. yes, I needed the face, but everything else was so loose, I almost didn't need the rest of it. And
Right.
what I let myself do is I let myself layer very thinly, layer some oil, and then I just took a bristle and I, you know, took some Gamsol and I just literally just did this
Just
to
flicked it.
create, just
Yeah.
like splash some of the thinner on her. And that's what created those lines. And then from there, I just kind of started to, like with some bristles, I started to just kind of move them.
Mm-hmm.
Move. So that's how it was, nothing more than that. And then creating those patterns of dark around her. And the water is as abstract as I, possibly could make it. I just needed that flow of the, of the viewer's eye through it. I just needed this to happen. I didn't need, in the reference I had pretty defined dress on her, sort of semi-transparent dress on her. This is also the first time I am actually collaborated with a photographer in Russia
Hmm.
who was able to give me a model. So I basically explained what I needed, and she created some references where the model had a transparent dress and was somewhat submerged in the water. I
Oh,
literally just needed some references from that. So we collaborated. Yeah. So I basically bought from her some examples, which is very much a unique thing that I tried because, I hire the model. I always take my references, or I paint live when I can. With water, the problem is that I can never, I cannot paint live because I can't be above the swimming pool.
mm-hmm.
And then I tried so hard. I tried it with my kids. So I take a lot of reference photos. There was this one idea that I had where I just could not get the reference photo right. And then I know her and her work for a long time. So we connected, years ago. And she was able to be in a space where she could give me that. All I needed was how does the transparent material behave in the water?
Okay.
That's what I basically grabbed. I grabbed that from her. So it's the it's an example of where I purchased literally references of transparent material floating in the water.
But you've
But
clearly gone so far from the
But
reference.
then this is what happened, and then I didn't even need the dress at all,
Yeah.
because there's nothing there, and maybe this is one of the ones where I'm thinking, well, what if I make it larger and make it much more of a dress on her, but then she might lose some of that sort of abstraction that I liked so much.
That'd
So
be
yes,
interesting to see that large. Yeah, yeah, that would be challenging.
yeah,
Everything would
it's
have to
not
be
gonna
bigger,
be
so
the
much
same.
bigger.
It's not going to be the same, but what if I tried something on a larger scale? This one is 16 by 20, I think. And
Yeah, it is. And it's
um,
named Mellow 2 or Miro 2.
yeah, Miro, because I was considering, they wanted specifically the water series
Mm-hmm.
for the debut in Ireland. Mira means mermaid in
Ah,
Irish. Okay.
okay.
So I have her, and I have the previous one. And
Oh,
this is
this
an
is
example of
beautiful.
copper. So this is just it's a very small painting on copper, and I love that surface. I've been experimenting with it for 2 years now,
This
and
is
I just
titled Waiting 9 by 12 oil on copper. Go ahead. Sorry to cut you off there.
no, it's again, it was a very simple composition. It's really nothing more than the values exercise. It's not even that much of a, you know, uh, the color was not as interesting to me. That red got there sort of later because I just felt like it needed that depth and that sort of saturation. But otherwise, it was literally just mostly burnt sienna, burnt umber, some, I don't remember, King's Blue, and that was pretty much it. And then I had some copper exposed. So what I cannot show in the photos is when you move the copper around, then you could see the copper shining through a bit.
Yeah.
Especially those lower areas. And it changes as the light changes in the room. It changes quite a bit.
Yeah, that must be beautiful. So do you seal the copper somehow to keep it from tarnishing, to maintain that
Yes, you
quality?
have to varnish it. Fortunately, you can use the same varnish if you have a good varnish for your oils. You can seal with the same varnish. You cannot wait too long.
Wait a minute. Do you mean medium? You can seal with the same medium?
No, with the varnish at the end. So
Okay, so
once
you're saying you don't need a special varnish for the copper.
No, so these copper panels, this one is from Raymar and the other one is Artifacts. So they
Hmm.
both have very good panels where they actually sandwich the copper on top of aluminum, like ICM panel, so that it will never warp.
Hmm.
Because I had old copper panels where over time I could see them having that tendency. These are archival and they are ready to paint. You don't have to do anything. I used to sand them, the etching plates. I used to sand them before and etc. But these are beautiful. They have that matte shine on them. You can paint right there on them, and then just make sure that you varnish. You should not leave it for more than, I don't know, 3 months, I would say. And I know we have to wait 6 months, but usually to varnish the painting. But these are done thinly, so I never really have thick paint on them. They dry fast enough, and you really have to varnish it. If you don't varnish it over time, my understanding is you're right, it will oxidize and
Yeah.
etc.
Turn green.
Have to be careful. You have to be careful not to scratch the copper ever. So with your knife, etc., because you really do not want to do anything to the surface. Years ago, I was even thinking, well, what if I use a little bit of an acid to give some of that tarnished look, etc. And then, but I'm very, very careful with that archival sort of preservation, right? And so I've done a lot of research, and no, you should not do anything to copper, not to compromise the copper, because you just never know over time what's going to happen. This one, you varnish it, it will stay like that for centuries. I mean, Rembrandt used copper,
Right. And I read a long time ago when I was in school that copper has some sort of a chemical bond to oil paint that is more archival than any other surface. So apparently a lot of 17th century paintings they look like they were painted yesterday when they were painted on copper.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is
Exactly.
pretty awesome. I
would never try any other metal. I know some artists are trying to work on other metals, and I only know of this with copper. You're right. I don't want to be. I want to be safe.
Yeah, that's smart. So, you're familiar with Gamsol or Gamvar varnish?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
apparently you can do that as soon as it's dry to the touch, is what I hear. That's what I use.
For that. Yeah.
Oh, this is gorgeous too. So another water one with a man saunter.
Yeah, that's my older son. I really just try to express a feeling. I mean, like, to me, it wasn't about a realistic representation of a body in the water. I mean, yes, it has to look as such, but for me, it was just that feeling of being enveloped in it and being, and the current kind of taking you somewhere. I mean, that's, I think, where I'm so drawn to the water. I don't care of painting a model in the water.
Mm-hmm.
That's the least I'm thinking about. I am thinking about sort of that feeling of the touch of the water on the body. Like, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get the feel of being in that space, and maybe that's a metaphor for just floating with it, just being, you know. And the water is such a satisfying thing to paint because it can be so many different things, and
Mm-hmm.
it can be, a stroke can be interpreted in so many different ways, and that's, I think that's the fascination.
Yeah,
So
so I've been staring as you've been talking at Weightless. This is in the um Reinart, Fine Art,
yes,
Charleston.
yeah.
Okay. In that section of your website, and it's called Weightless number 3. And is this one of your kids as well?
No, it's another teenager that I
Okay.
bought. Yeah,
This
so up
is one of my
there.
favorites, by the way, of yours. And you said that you're not only thinking about, you're not concerned about painting a person or painting an object. And I believe you, but you clearly have very strong academic skills because your drawings are very, very convincing and very accurate. They seem very accurate to me.
Thank
So
you.
so that might be second on your priority list, but clearly there's something there. I mean, you are clearly concerned about using your drawing skills in these paintings.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe let me rephrase it. I want it to be done right, and
Yeah,
I want the body to be the body, and I want to, but it's for the purposes of making someone believe there is a body in the water,
right.
and right. I don't want to have an academic, you know, like in my art school, we had so many just academic poses that could be beautifully done, or, you know, drawings of plaster casts forever. They're beautifully done, but they don't give me the feeling. And here it's the body that is sort of enveloped with something else, and extended to become an excuse to give you some emotion that I was trying to feel, I guess, is what I'm trying to use figurative works for.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you're not showing off your academic skills because they're only there as a tool in order to in order to create the expression and emotion and movement that you want in the painting, but nothing
It's,
more.
I need to write that down.
Well, and I say that because, I have to be honest with you. Like sometimes I feel like maybe I'm showing off. Like, maybe I need to loosen up a little bit and not just constantly feel like I need to prove to the world how well I can draw. Right.
Oh,
Um,
I see what you're
so
saying.
I admire this. Like, and one of the questions I had for you earlier was, um, how can you be so brave? Because some of these paintings are so unbelievably loose and unfinished. And it takes courage to just say, I'm done and walk away. Right. And not
Thanks.
because they're not beautiful, but because for me personally, I feel like I would be tempted to be like, okay, but what if I could make it better? What if? And so it takes courage to walk away and go, no, now it's done. I think it does. So maybe for you, it's not, maybe it's just easy for you. I don't know.
No,
Maybe,
no. I think I completely understand what you're saying. And there are some paintings where that's where I overworked them.
yeah,
I'm trying to be, at least I'm trying to be very clear as what is my idea for the painting. And if I accomplish that idea, then I am trying to make myself separate. And quite frankly, sometimes I'm so tired and so fed up with it that I have to let it dry and let it be, and move on to some other, to some other painting. So sometimes I stop, when I am clear as to I accomplished that. Yes, I do not, well, but I guess sometimes I overwork because I don't step away fast enough.
Hmm.
And then it becomes a portrait. I'm trying to not make it a portrait, because I can spend literally days and days and days on just a head, even if it's a small head. I can refine it to a point of, and then my painting didn't accomplish anything with that,
Yeah.
I guess.
The fun thing about doing these podcasts, Olga, is that like have been learning so much. I did not anticipate this, which maybe says something about my arrogance or something. I don't know. But I've learned a ton from all these artists. And what I'm learning from you is that there's something that I believed up until now that I totally think I've been wrong all this time. And that is, Nelson Shanks said once, at least I've been told, I didn't hear him say it, but I've been told Nelson Shanks said that if a painting is overworked, you haven't worked it enough.
Yeah.
And then I hear you say, and I would always tell my students that, because the way I paint, that's true, right? Because it really is true. And it meant something to me, because I paint in many, many layers, trying to find the what I'm looking for. But what I'm seeing is that is only true for me and Nelson Shanks and other painters like us who are after what we're after. Because with you absolutely could overwork a painting, because you're after something completely different. And if once you cover that underpainting, like on this one here, which is, this is called Respite, and it's 18 by 36. Once you cover up that umber in the background, well, you're toast, right? Now you've got a whole different painting, right? So yeah, so you can overwork things. So I stand corrected. Now I've got to tell all my students that I've been lying to them all this time. So thanks for that, Olga. Appreciate it.
There's so many ways of, creating that. There is no right or wrong.
No, there's not.
Sometimes I just need that movement through that stroke, and if I'm looking at the background and it doesn't give it to me, I have to go with that gut feel, I guess, and not. But then again, you're talking about your paintings. When I look at my paintings, I think, but I want to change this. I want to change this. I want to change that as well. I think we're much more critical about our work.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that's true. Yeah, that's the curse of the artist, right?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think I would change. I would change. But the thing is that I wouldn't, because it would be a completely different painting. And if in my head, it's almost like I'm telling the students, you have to almost write down on a piece of paper and stick it somewhere. My idea up front for this painting is this. It's this light shape that I was drawn to. What is it that I was drawn to? And then maybe everything else is secondary. And then maybe we're putting too much pressure on ourselves trying to make everything perfect. Like, what is perfect? I don't know. When I try to chase that, I know that I will work on a small painting for so long, overwork it so much, and then it would just never bring back what I wanted to convey, I think. Also, another thing. So one is we're looking at our own paintings with a much more critical eye. But then two, I think that when we look at an artist's work, or a work of a particular artist, we don't realize we're looking at a subsection only of what he created, and what he threw away, or what he did not put up or did not show on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the biggest things that I, even took from Jeremy in those Tuesday nights, because I've seen some paintings that are never, never published because they're smaller sketches, or I've seen him working on a really small head for 3 hours, 4 hours or whatever we had there, just the same way as he would do on a larger. It's just we don't see we don't see everything,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see your paintings that you are maybe not proud of and just toss away on
Oh,
your
heck
your
no. I don't want the world to see that garbage.
well, see, but me, I see what you want me to see,
Right.
I see what I love, and then my idea of you is maybe different than your idea of you, because you create so much more than I create so much more than this. I have
Yeah.
in my studio where they just accumulate because I haven't finished this, I haven't finished this. If I'm not excited about it, I just know that it's not going to be good, and I just put it aside, and it's hours and hours, I mean, probably months at this point of work that is just sitting there and waiting to be maybe reworked, right? So
Yeah. You know what just occurred to me as you're talking? So my son, his name is Chase Hine, Wilder Nerds he's got a website called Wilder Nerds. He's a photographer, nature photographer. He's very talented, but he'll come home with hundreds of photos and then only finish 4 or 5 of them. And I remember when he was younger being like, Chase, that's how it works, right? You take as
yeah,
many as you can, as best you can, and then what makes you an artist is that you edit and you figure out what is good and what isn't good, and you throw out the garbage and you keep the good stuff. And it just occurred to me as you're talking, why don't artists give themselves that space, or give themselves that a break, because we throw out so many paintings, like a photographer throws out photos, and then we let it haunt us, like, well, that's part of who we are too. But maybe it's the editing that is the artist. The stuff that you're willing to show is the stuff that you approve of, therefore that is your art, right?
exactly.
Maybe that's
I,
probably just an
I
excuse, just a little ego massage for me.
No, it's something that I've been also kind of thinking about, that, people that I love, I would love to see everything they do, but that's, impossible unless you're on very close terms with somebody. But also it makes us human. We're not production mill.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, we are we are human, and maybe we're even more human in some ways. We're sensitive to such little nuances, of a sort of, color temperature shift. Like, if you think about how much is in our head, how much is moving us, right? And it's only natural that we will filter, and maybe we should take it as, I created something that I will filter out, it will, put aside, but it was an exercise that, at least I'm thinking, some of those exercises and some of those experiential ones with abstraction and splashing it came back to, for example, to that painting. It seems like it's still somewhere in your head, whatever you've done. Like, maybe it's not a waste of time, I guess I'm trying to say. It's sort of, it's a little like stepping stone to something, maybe.
Yeah.
As sad as it is to see some of those paintings just sitting there. I mean, how many panels are in? I mean, just to take back and reuse those panels would be awesome, but you don't, because that's going to be, not archival enough, I think. But it just sits there, and it's just like that constant reminder that I've done that, and maybe it's okay, and maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
okay to to have a throwaway moment or day or week of releasing something. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah. I like
I
that
guess
idea.
tangent, but I think that everybody. I mean, if there are some students that are listening right now, they should know that sort of until we die, we will be this critical, and we would be throwing away things and writing that.
Yeah. You know, one of my favorite painters is Waterhouse. And I have every book I can find on his work, and I can only find two paintings that look amateur from his youth. Um, and it's obvious there's no way he was born painting like that, right? So he's obviously thrown away a lot of work and hid it from the world. And that's the case for many, many dead artists, that we just can't find any of their garbage. There's no way they came out of the womb a Sargent or a Michelangelo or a Rembrandt, you know. Um, they edit, right? They throw away the bad and they put the good out there for the world to see and to judge them by, like photographers do. So yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's
But I
interesting.
think also, I'm thinking, what is that judgment? Because, sometimes you have, and I know you work with the collectors directly, but like, let's say in my galleries, I would have side by side two paintings. One is my absolute favorite. The other one is not quite about the same price range, but the collector falls in love with this.
Oh, doesn't that drive
You
you
know,
crazy?
no, but that makes me think that, there is something we express there still. We express there. And by the way, I would never even offer a gallery a painting that I don't like. So it's not that pile that I'm talking about.
Right.
But in general, like in terms of that sort of judgment, we are the strongest judges of our own work. And as long, but we let that emotion out, and then that connects with somebody or it doesn't connect. It might be a beautifully done painting that doesn't quite find that viewer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
what basis are we judging on? I
Right.
guess I don't.
Well, the reason it drives me crazy is because I have to accept the fact that I'm in a career where I can't control the outcome, because we can only do our best, and then we put our work out there, and the clients are not going to necessarily think your best work in your mind is your best work. So, and what that means is, in my mind, is that we don't really know when we're doing our best work from their perspective. So there's that mystery there. So you just got to put out everything you're willing to put out there, and just be like, well, I guess at this point they're the judge, even though you know your best work. In other words, it'd be nice to be able to paint a painting and go, that is a winner. That one's going to sell, and just know it. It might be the one that never sells or that hangs on a wall for 6 months. You just never know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's very unpredictable.
I'm wondering, you mentioned Waterhouse, but it's interesting because when I look at your work, I
Oh, I
don't
don't
see
paint anything
him,
like him.
right? Like you, and what do you feel you're taking from him, or what are you inspired
Oh, nothing.
in
I'm
his?
not taking anything from him. I mean, a lot of the artists that I admire, I don't borrow from. Um, I
Not
just,
borrow, but like, what did you learn? What did you learn from him that helped you? Um,
well, this is really about you. I'll answer this briefly, but
okay.
but I'm flattered that you asked, but I'll just answer briefly. What I admire, of course, is his academic ability, but what I really admire and that I'd like to take from him, and I'm forever working toward, is just his ability to design a narrative, a sophisticated narrative. It's just that multi-figure painting to me is this It's this unreachable destination. It's so unbelievably difficult. Um, and so when I see people like him who seems to reach there in every painting, at least every painting he showed to us, it's just, I have so much admiration for that. So that's really it, composing multi-figure paintings in a really sophisticated way. So his painting style, like how he applies paint, absolutely love it. But I'm more Rembrandt. I'm more
Yes.
influenced by the Rembrandt in that direction. So that brings up a question for you though. What are some who and what are some of your influences?
Oh my gosh.
I know it's a
I
hard
have a very
question.
long, no, it's an easy question. It's just a long, it might be um, a long answer because there is a set of artists of the past, right, that you grew up with, that you sort of you wanted to be like, and for me, then it was always that end of 19th century titans, right? I mean, Repin, of course, Ilya Repin
Oh my
for
gosh. Yeah.
absolutely. And then Serov was one of his students. And then you had Nikolai Fechin, who was a completely different, also a student of Repin, but took it to that thickness of the abstraction to a point that nobody, and Malavin, I guess, well, so that sort of cluster of them, just I love. I was in a huge I was able to be in Moscow for that huge retrospective of Repin that they had, like 3 stories. I don't remember how many works they had, and it was just unbelievable experience. And the thickness of the stroke and the ability to create those multi-figure compositions on that large scale. He's painting. He has a painting of uh, Ivan the Terrible with his son, and the
Oh my
son
gosh, that
is sort
painting
of
is unbelievable.
you are traumatized just standing in front of it. Unfortunately, and I saw it several times in person, and it's unbelievable what textures and such. And unfortunately, it's been in the restoration for for a long time because somebody either stabbed it or.
Oh my gosh.
But that has to tell you how much people, you know, get moved. They can even actually destroy a painting. But so it's them. And then Levitan is one of our best landscape artists. Vrubil to a point. And then I discovered obviously Sargent, obviously Zorn, Sorolla and
Oh
his
yeah.
handling of water. His handling of water and the sand and the sun drenched sort of that Spanish landscape. Nobody composes like him, or that fluent line that goes through forms, right? I would say that is my biggest, that that just shocked me, and the paintings are so vibrant still after all these years of so and there's so many more. I mean, of course, Rembrandt, of course, it's just that subtleties of that light, and how his shadows, his nothingness in his paintings is
Mm-hmm.
so powerful, right? It's so simple, it's so flat and transparent and receding, and then you have that light that just, I don't know how it's possible to achieve. I think we will forever try and try to do that. So I would say those are probably for, if I'm talking the artists of the past. And then I have the whole slew of artists that I constantly admire. I mean, I already said Jeremy, especially his earlier works, his earlier more fluid, sort of loose nudes, and and regardless of what you think of the subject matter, the it that emotional sort of quietness of those of those pieces was just unbelievable. And how subtle, how subtle that the way he shapes those forms are, in those lights. I was so drawn to his work. But then Julio Reyes, and I'm probably butchering the names now, and again that subtlety and his layering of colors side by side, and maybe that's what tempera does. No, in terms of
I don't know tempera
massaging.
well. I know it dries fast, so that's probably why. Yeah.
He just layers them, and he creates it using colors that I would never even think to put together, and that subtlety of them. And then again, I'm gonna butcher, but Denis Saragin,
Oh, I'm not
he's
familiar.
so he's also at Arcadia. He's a Ukrainian artist who has beautiful, very uh, very often multi-figure compositions where there are a lot of male semi-nudes or male sort of muscles and shapes that he just kind of weaves together. And the way, what I admire in him is something that I'm trying to see if I can even, I guess, to step back. We're so trained academically that we are, like you were saying, when we shape a body, we shape the form, we are using our background, and he breaks that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not scared to break it and to simplify it and to simplify that line and make it almost posterized in a way, but everything together, weave together, woven together, it gives me that feeling of almost a tapestry through strokes and shapes and such. So I'm very much drawn to him. There are a lot of there are a lot of photographers. There's and Mia Bergeron, I think I already mentioned. Zoe Frank, her
Mm-hmm.
compositions are very interesting. What she's doing with those, even those geometric shapes and layering them and such. Um, and I know that I'm gonna, this is just scratching the surface at this point. I have like the whole list of them that
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes give
Yeah,
the
I know what you
students,
mean.
but and and in terms of the photographers, there's a photographer, Andrea Kiss, who composes with very, very simple, cropped sort of objects or bodies where it could be nothing more than a color with some kind of safety pin in it. Like there's something so soft and sensitive and so feminine and so quiet, like a very, very quiet sort of uh, photograph. And I think it's Jefferson Heyman, I think, is another photographer who kind of has that. It's almost like it's a photo of a memory that I never had.
Hmm.
And it resonates. And I think it resonates with me trying to create some of those quieter, smaller pieces. It's not that I am, it's that mood of softness and some sort of subtle emotion through very, very little means, that's what I'm very, very much attracted to. But then you have, there is a artist, I believe maybe she's Spanish, but she lives in Amsterdam, Lita Cabelut, who has these massive paintings where she drops this paint and she creates those, costumed almost infantas, and and it's almost like a party of reds and blacks and abstraction, and yet it's a very real bodies that I see.
Hmm.
So
I haven't heard of her either. I have to look her up.
yeah, completely different from me,
Mm.
but Bernini sculptures. I forgot about Bernini when I was talking about my
Oh,
and
yeah, he's incredible.
yeah, right. I mean, just how can you sculpt marble where the fingers get into the skin, just the softness of the body is under your fingertips and in indented skin, pulsating skin in marble, and it works in 3D. I am
Hmm.
mesmerized.
Well,
I'm
that's quite a
mesmerized.
list. Just like I would say all but maybe two of those are on my list of people I'd like to interview. The living ones, of course. Well, I'd love to
Yeah.
interview dead ones too, but I don't see that happening.
My list is much longer, but
Yeah.
I'm not prepared with the
Yeah.
whole. I should start the,
But then the other
but
two I'm not familiar with. I'll have to look them up.
there's every day somebody that we are all in a way product, not product, students of Richard Schmidt.
Yeah.
We're all, I I love I love I love the approach of Sherry McGraw.
Hmm.
I don't like every single painting, but the way she teaches and the way she layers her stroke, I can look at that forever. Or the way she layers the line in her drawing.
Yeah. 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 She's very gifted. So, I said in the beginning of the conversation that I can't see your influences, but now that you've mentioned a few artists, I guess I can now. If I were to pick two of the ones you listed, I would say Richard Schmidt and Sorolla are two influences you have. Yeah,
Definitely.
because I can definitely see Sorolla in your work, and I hadn't picked it out, which is good. I mean, you've clearly separated yourself, and you have your own authentic look to your painting and quality to your painting that's very much you, which is really congratulations for finding that. That's a really wonderful thing to find. So we're getting close to 90 minutes. So I want to ask you two final questions. One of them might take a minute, but I want to. First question is, what is your daily schedule like? I mean, from day to day as a painter.
It okay. So I try to go to the easel pretty much as soon as I drop the kids off at school if I need to. So I would say 8:30, and then I try to have a day of painting interrupted by taking the kids from school, feeding them or whatever. The days that I don't have them, that those are the days that I don't have the schedule. I literally can just go and create. And I used to create until like 3 a.m.
Wow.
And then I realized, then I realized how much I actually was destroying because I wasn't thinking straight at
Hmm.
night. So I don't quite do that anymore. So I yeah, so I try just to be there all the time. But then you have to do your shipping, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
do your conversations with the gallerists. You have to do model shooting if you have a model. If I don't do a live model or logistics. And that's where I start to get antsy because I don't feel like I'm working, even though it's work. I feel like those are not the hours of the easel, and I start to get aggravated because I just wasted all that time. There are times, and again, we're all human. There are times when I find myself vacuuming, doing everything I can possibly do because I'm stuck on a painting and I'm trying to find excuses as to I need to do this, I need to do that, when it's actually me trying to not procrastinate, like think through the painting without being in front of it. Um,
Do you ever find
so
yourself just intimidated? Just too intimidated to go up to the canvas, and so you procrastinate?
sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I were to be, yeah, I mean, we're honest here. Yes, sometimes I don't quite know where to go from there. And sometimes I wish, and I know you do that for larger paintings, probably all the studies and trying to find it first, doing all that groundwork. Sometimes I'm so excited about some project where I just go right in and I did not think through some of the pieces. I wish I did, and then I need to step back and say, look, I didn't think that through. I have to
Mm.
think it through. And some of that thinking I have to do outside of actually being there. So it's a backwards process where I should have done all the thumbnails and such, and instead I jumped right in and
Yeah, I've done that many times.
yeah,
Hmm.
so
Do you always enjoy it when you're painting?
no, no. And I tell myself this is a job. This is well, it's more than a job. It's a you have to do you have to do it no matter what. I remind myself how I was in the corporate world where I don't want to do that project or I don't want to have that meeting with a client, but you have to because you have to. So you have to sometimes you just have to put yourself together and just paint. I actually love deadlines.
Hmm.
Ironically, I love deadlines because I know I have the deadline and I have to push through it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are times when I love it, absolutely love it, and you're in that space and you know this is what I'm meant to do. But unfortunately, there are there are times when you borderline hate it.
I'm glad you said that. So, isn't that interesting? Because earlier you said that you said a couple things. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but you said if you can't paint because you're doing things like sending paintings, paying bills, whatever, it frustrates you and gets you anxious. And then you also said earlier that you might not have put it this way, but this is how I took it. You just live to paint. This was way back in the beginning of the conversation when you weren't able to paint full time. And yet
Yeah.
sometimes you just hate it. And I find that interesting because I'm the same way. Like, and I could go, if I go a week without painting because I'm so busy with business stuff, I get so
Yes.
grumpy. And then once I get to the easel, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be doing this. So there's always this dichotomy where you're like, you got one side of you that's like, this is so much work. I'd rather be doing something else. But then when you're doing something else, like, no, I'd rather be doing that.
You almost have to take that break. So maybe that's what it is because sometimes when you have that break, and then I'm dying to go there. I'm
Yeah.
dying to get right, and you know you're going to create now. But isn't it the same with anything? I love my dogs, but I hate my dogs sometimes. I mean, I love my kids, but sometimes, right?
That's a
You
good
know,
point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
it's 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 no matter what because we feel strongly about it, and it has to be right, and it has to be beautiful, and it's all that pressure that we put on it, and maybe we just kind of like with the kids, it just has to evolve and you just have to let it breathe and
Yeah.
I
You
don't
know,
know.
another analogy that comes to mind is my wife, it loves chicken wings. She grew up in Rochester, New York, near Buffalo, sort of near Buffalo.
Yeah.
So she loves chicken wings, but she is a total snob with chicken wings. She has to have just the right chicken wing. Everything else is garbage. So it's funny, like she loves it so much that she hates it. I'm like, if you, I think if I love chicken wings, I would
Mm,
want all chicken wings. No, that's not how it works. It's got to be just the right chicken wing. And I kind of feel that way about my paintings. I love painting because I love that high you get when everything is in sync and everything is going right, right? But that's not always going to happen. So you end up battling 80% of the time to get to that 20% of the time where you're
yeah,
feeling a high, you know. But
yeah,
that's
yeah.
reality, that's life, right?
But that's again, you are so strongly invested in you will go through these cycles, but it's always a strong emotion. You're never indifferent. You're never just creating to create or to sell, or it's not about that at all. I mean, how many average paintings did you toss away? Yeah, you could sell them, but you know, it's your brand, it's your name, it's your name on it. There's no way.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so my last question is, if you're speaking to students or aspiring artists, what's one piece of advice you would give them that you wish you had when you were young?
When I'm young,
Maybe not even young, just an aspiring artist. What advice would you give an aspiring artist?
I think that you want to do it because you want it badly enough. If you want it just as a career, there are plenty of careers that are much easier. You know, if you have to really know that you are born to do it. And if you didn't get that feeling yet, you have to get that feeling. I feel like that is an important feeling, because without it, I don't think there is a way to succeed in this job, or not job, this vocation, this calling. Like, you have to have this call. It's not because you have the skill. I know so many, and in my art school, there were, it's not just the skill. You have to have something to say. You have to have something to, you have to portray that emotion. It's not about just, I can create a beautiful figure and therefore I will be an artist creating that beautiful figure. Because at some point, you know, you will show your skill to the world, but it has to be, I feel it has to be more. It has to be that sort of inner voice in you saying, I have to do it. Because even if you want to be in art, there are other vocations in art. You know, you could be a gallerist, you could be something else. Maybe as a student, you want to have exposure to everything first. You want to go work in a gallery go work with the dealer for, like, try many things maybe first to know that this is it, because you are gonna dedicate your life, you know, it's not gonna be an average life. And your whole family is gonna be, you know, affected by you. How many artists do we have who decide not to even have kids, right? Because they're so, you know, it demands so much more of a person than any other, what I call normal jobs. So I just want you to be sure you are, and also it's really dedicated hours and hours and hours and hours. If you think you're going to go to a workshop and be all, you know, get a skill there, no, it's you're going to spend hours and hours and hours of working and finding who you are and finding that uniqueness that is yours that you have to express. So I think maybe that, and then also yeah, and also just know that everybody, and you can see from me, like, everybody has a different path, and there is no right path, and there is no right age. Yeah. Maybe, or that's what I'm telling myself. It's when you got that feeling, that gut feel that you have to.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, Olga, it was a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a real honor to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.